girls, thank you for joining us this evening. I am Big Baba Rob. I will be kind of, I guess you call moderating this discussion tonight. It appears that I'm live now. I don't know if I was live before, so just in case, I'm going to start over with what I was saying. Hello, I am Big Baba Rob from the Black Geeks, and tonight we're going to do a special. We're doing a special, super special, awesome discussion about everything that we saw at the Apple Live event. And to enlighten us, including myself, I am not a big Apple user myself, but I love technology. I would say I'm probably like the junior technology consultant. But ladies and gentlemen, I have our senior technology consultant and Apple developer extraordinaire. Ladies and gentlemen, Darky Conis is with us this evening. What's up, my brother?
Hey, what's going on, Rob? What's going on, everybody watching this live and watching this later on YouTube?
Yeehaw! All right, so we're going to pretty much go in sequence with the program that you saw at the Apple Live event today. Apple dropped just a lot of information and some really industry leading stuff as they talked about a lot of the technologies that they're bringing to the table. I thought it was very interesting, one of the closing statements and that they made for the event, but I'll talk about that when we get to the end of it. But Geekonius, first of all, your overall, just you watched the whole thing. What was your overall opinion of the Apple Live event today?
To sum it up, I would say everyone came for the Apple Watch. We all came to see how much it was going to cost, when it was going to be released, and we got much more than we expected, much more than we bargained for. So I think it was a good event on that level. So I was pretty impressed with what I saw.
Yeah, I think I was surprised that wasn't the first Apple event. Now I could not watch the actual live feed, but I was able to follow along. They did a really great kind of scrolling slide presentation for those of us who did not have a Mac product, so we couldn't watch the live. But it was my first one, and actually I really enjoyed it from a technology standpoint. I was impressed with a lot of what they brought to the table. There were some things that I was like, okay, yeah, I've seen that, and or I'm like, okay, I can see where that was coming. So I wasn't too shocked, but still, it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool. I felt that it moved along pretty well, and not actually watching the video feed. I know that I did not get in some of the cinematics of it all, but I kind of like just getting the facts um and just watching it that way. So let's get this party started. Let's start at the beginning. I have my prepared notes here because I like to be freaking organized, and that's how I roll. So one of the first things that Tim Cook hit us with right off the bat is talking about the significance of the use of Apple TV and their partnership with HBO now. So first of all, Dr. Conius, for those who aren't familiar with the technology, could you please break down Apple TV and why this relationship with HBO now is so significant?
Well, first off, this announcement was huge. And just to preface it, there were several announcements during the Apple event that were much larger than they appear. This is a case of one of them. Apple TV is one of those products that Apple has always said it's a hobby for them. It wasn't something they've always promoted. It's always been treated as just an accessory to an Apple household. Some of the key features of the Apple TV, of course, it works like most streaming media boxes, like your Roku's and your Amazon, devices, and Google what's the Google thing, the Chrome device. It works similar in the sense that you can stream TV, but it's not as free as Roku in this regard. So people that are familiar with Roku, they know that it's a lot of sources you can stream from. Apple does it more from an app perspective. So, you got your HBO Goes, you got your ABC Now, those type of things, CW, Hulu, Netflix, and you can watch the shows through the apps just like you would on any other device. But there is no formal app store for the Apple TV, so it's always been limited in the sense that you only get the apps that Apple allows in their platform. So that's always been a big criticism of the Apple TV was that it doesn't have a dedicated app store and it's not open for developers. But some of the key features that it's always been notable for, particularly for Apple users, of course, is the idea that anything you're playing on any Apple device can automatically be sent to the Apple TV, and and you can watch it on whatever TV you have the Apple TV hooked up to. So some of the use cases that have always been trumped were, you come in the door, you've been outside on the train or whatever, and you come in and you're watching something on Netflix or YouTube or whatever, and you sit down in the living room and you can push a button and it automatically goes to your TV. So that's one of the key features of Apple TV. It's portable. It works well for presentations that way. You can beam presentations to the television screen and control them with your iPad or your iPhone or even your MacBook or Mac Pros. They're all closed network. As long as you're on the same Wi-Fi device, you can beam stuff to the Apple TV. So it's always been good as an accessory. The announcement today that was large. One was the price reduction. They've always been criticized for the $99 entry point when you have similar media streaming boxes that do more as far as television watching. For sometimes it's half or even lower. So they reduced the price to $69. But the huge announcement with the HBO Now, which makes that announcement and that partnership really huge, is the idea that for the longest people have been wondering if HBO was going to create a separate streaming service. Last year they announced that they would at some time in 2015, but they had not said anything about pricing. So not only did we find out that yes, they are introducing a product called HBO Go, HBO Now. It's going to be a $15 a month subscription, and they've exclusively partnered with Apple, so that the only way you can get HBO Now at this time is through Apple TV or Apple devices. So what this subscription allows you to do is you don't have to have cable, which is one of the limitations of HBO Go and many other TV and movie apps that you can get on your devices, iOS or Android, is that you must already have a cable subscription to that service and has to authenticate for you to use it on your mobile devices. HBO Now is now mimicking the Hulu and Netflix platform, where it's giving you access to HBO shows that's currently playing in the archive, of course, without a cable subscription. And HBO being as hugely popular as it is, the understanding and why this is huge is that other content providers may follow suit, and we may see the upending of cable as we know it. Something that Steve Jobs, prior to his death, he was really interested in doing, and Apple had been working on this for years. They've been wanting to break content away from providers, and the idea would be that they'd have this Apple TV device where you could, basically buy the channels as you want them. So this is one of the first steps in that fight against cable and cord cutting, and I think it was really huge. But I don't anticipate that HBO Now will be an Apple exclusive for long. Maybe 6 months tops, I think.
Well, if Costco can break their relationship with American Express, anything's possible. So
Well, it's huge with HBO doing it. That's what I'm
well,
saying.
yeah,
It's significant. If this was just like CW or or something, it'd be like, okay, great, I can get Arrow, The Flash, or Supergirl, and shows like that, untethered or from cable. But you can watch those on Hulu.
right. And I think also if you think about the bigger picture, this also kind of gives these other providers incentive to continue to create their exclusive content as well.
Exactly. I personally believe that where this is going, people like Verizon, Comcast, AT&T, and even Google with Google Fiber are going to become more into the data business than they're going to be into the providing content business. I
Hmm.
truly believe that not this year, maybe not even next year, but the writing is on the wall. This is one of the biggest blows that were dealt. And HBO did start this already with the partnership with Amazon. A lot of
Hmm.
people don't know that if you have an Amazon Prime subscription, they partnered with HBO months ago to provide HBO content on Amazon Prime. The only exception was it was older content. So you had your Sopranos and your Oz's and your Wires and stuff like that, but stuff that was currently on the show
Hmm.
on HBO wasn't there. So HBO is, you got to remember HBO you also own Cinemax too. So we don't know how broad this is going to go. Is Showtime now going to say, hey, we need to get in on this? The only question is for consumers in the big scheme of things, how this is going to play out because you're paying $10 a month for Netflix, you're paying $10, so $8 for Hulu, $15 for HBO. You know, I guess for some users, just those three or four, you come up with a $40 bill a month. That might be fine. But what's
Hmm.
going to happen with, so we'll see. But it's really huge in this big battle of content.
It is. And I'm going to add just a quick transitional question. One of the facts that they rolled out, and within this presentation, they provided us with a number of just facts about Apple. And, I think looking at it from a marketing standpoint, it was excellently, very, very well done in pointing out the strength of the company. Um, if I was an investor and like many millions of people out there, I think they'd be very happy with was one of the facts that they brought out. And so during this conversation, I'm going to ask just a couple of, if you could just comment briefly about these so that we can continue to stay on the main topics. One of the facts that, excuse me, I'm sorry, I don't have a cough button. Well, I guess technically I do. I was just too lazy to press it. One of the facts that they brought out was that there are now 432 Apple retail stores in 16 countries with over 120 million visitors in the last quarter alone. Geekonies, with these visitors to the Apple Store, are these usually Apple users that are going for support? Are these shoppers? I mean, I know that I walked by a local Apple store in Annapolis, and I just see so many. I mean, the store is literally filled to the gills. I don't know how they're they're still below fire code. There's so many people in there. What are when they say visitors? Who are the people that are going to the Apple stores?
Well, it's all
Oh,
of the
can I just remind you? I did say briefly. I just want to remind you. I said briefly. Thank you. Go ahead. Please continue.
wow, wow, on the air burn. Wow.
Look, dude. I know you, man. I know you. I told you
I
I want to stay on topic,
Hey,
but
it's Apple. I'm really excited.
I know you are. You
Uh,
got lots of stuff to get excited
I mean,
about.
just look at my background. Look at all those Apple boxes just sitting there, and that's not even the surface of the boxes.
I know.
Um,
So
but
briefly.
I was just gonna say it's all of the above. Actually, I mean, what I've experienced. Sometimes you go there just to see the accessories, and if you already have an Apple device, or you go there to look at the new products. You have people who are just curious. They want to touch them. And then you have people who want support. I mean, it's a combination of all of them. I'm personally not a big fan of the Apple Store. Surprise, surprise. Mainly because it's so many people. If I'm in the Apple Store, it's for a reason. I'm there and I'm in and I'm out. That's I'm not a you know sit back and play with the Apple devices thing.
Got you. Completely understood. All right. So I want to talk about one of the things that, and I must say, for the majority of this presentation, I was pretty solid. There were a couple of things that they brought up that I hadn't even heard of before. Could you tell folks about this car play? They said one of the things they said is that every major car brand is committed to delivering car play. Could you tell us about car play and what exactly that is?
Well, CarPlay is essentially a mechanism that's built into the iPhones. I happen, because I'm a registered Apple developer, I'm already running iOS 8.3, which probably won't be released for another couple months. And it already has CarPlay functionality built into it. And basically, if I had a CarPlay enabled car, when I would get in my vehicle, you would plug up your iPhone device, and the interface of your vehicle would change on your car stereo, or just the way you interact with your car, to allow you to not have to rely on your phone for basic tasks like making phone calls or texting. You would do a lot more interaction with Siri. music. It's basically a means to, in some cars, the display would even change, and you can tap the apps with your finger. So it's a way to get in your car, plug up your phone, and just put it away. I liken it to, for those of us who have vehicles that they have the iPod or whatever your MP3 player device is, you can plug it up in your glove compartment or in your armrest and control the music through your stereo. It's a similar functionality with the exception that is beyond music. It's now interaction with Siri. Siri call such and such, or read me back this text, or send a message to such and such without having the phone in your hand. So it's meant to be accessible, but it's also meant to get away from people using their phones in their hands while they're driving. So it's a safety thing as well. Though some experts, don't know if it'll change, but I personally believe there's a huge difference between someone holding their phone in their hand, trying to change the station or trying to do whatever, and playing it through Bluetooth in their car, than just plugging the phone up, putting it away, and then just doing everything from your steering wheel or voice or what have you to the radio. Huge difference. So that's basically what CarPlay is. And in order to get those interfaces, the CarPlay devices I've seen, uh, some of them are just a regular stereo with a touchscreen, and then once you plug up Apple, the app interface comes on. And some will just have the functionality to still be able to control the phone, much like people already do with their Bluetooth or actual iPod slash MP3 player devices.
Gotcha. Yeah, and speaking of, I think Apple going outside of the home and just going abroad technically. One of the next things that they talk about was Apple Pay. This is something that you've used yourself, that you've experienced, and you've commented on numerous times on the Black Geeks podcast, which is on Sundays at 10:30 p.m. On YouTube. Uh, Come on
get,
now, I'm
get,
doing
get
my
that in
job.
there. Get that
I'm doing
marketing
my
there.
job. You like that? So yeah, make sure you can go. The Black Geeks. We do a live show on at 10:30s on Sundays. So if you follow us on Facebook or Twitter, you make sure you can get those notifications. But one of the things that they talked about during the Apple Pay, when they talked about Apple Pay, and they dropped a number of really interesting facts that I want to share with you for those who didn't get a chance to watch it. They said that Apple Pay is now available at 40,000 Coca-Cola vending machines. Apple Pay works with 2,500 banks and all 10. Wait a minute, what? All 10 of your fingers. You'll have to explain that one. I think I understand that one. And then Apple Pay is being accepted in nearly 700,000 locations. Um, with more locations and apps every day. Econis, could you talk about the success of Apple Pay, the implementation of it, um, and how this is being received, in your opinion, by the masses?
Apple Pay is nothing short of amazing. I'm not just saying that as an Apple fan. Um, the technology involved, the way it's being used, the rate at which it's being implemented, is just an amazing feature that Apple launched. And the biggest thing about Apple Pay, besides the convenience, is the security. Um, and I've had this discussion. It feels like hundreds of times at this point about what Apple Pay is and how it works, and to see that it's now opening up to other devices such as vending machines is a huge thing. Though I don't advocate everyone using the vending machines all the time. And there's rumors that it's going to expand to gas pumps. And for those of you who still don't know what Apple Pay is, it's basically a system. And I wish I could actually hook my iPhone up to the uh, display. Actually, I could. I just
You
didn't.
could. Don't do it. Don't do
I,
it.
I hadn't thought
Don't,
about it, but I could actually present it.
don't
But
show
see,
it.
as you can see, and I'll give an example. Here's my passport, right, on my iPhone. And you see I have one of my debit cards here, and I have another debit card here. It could be a credit card. It's probably too much light to see that. But basically, what it does is you put your cards in Apple Pay. You can take a picture of the card and it'll read the numbers, and then your bank authenticates the card. And what the bank is doing is authenticating and you letting your phone have the authority to set up transactions for your Visa, Mastercard, or credit or debit card. So when you want to pay for something, it works two ways. Just like any other checkout procedure, the cashier will ring up your item, and when it comes time to pay, one or two things will happen. Either your phone is in the proximity of the device and it will automatically pop up on your screen. Your primary debit card or credit card that you've set to be primary will pop up, and if that's the card you want to use, you simply put your thumb and it'll say approved, and that's it. It'll say done. If you want to change the card, you just swipe to the card you want, put your thumb on it, the transaction goes through. Now on the back end, what's happening is basically the iPhone is generating a one-time encrypted code that it sends to the terminal, um, approving the transaction. So the bank has already authorized the card. When the machine and the phone interacts, the machine will send the money, an encrypted code to the phone saying this is how much it costs. Then the phone will send some to the bank. The bank will approve it. It'll go back to the phone and then it'll go to the cashier. And all of this time, it's all encrypted. It's all one-time use cards. And in fact, your card number isn't even existent on the phone except for when you first set it up. So even when I showed you my cards, if you could see them clearly, I had no fear because all you're going to see is the last four digits anyway. It means nothing to you. It doesn't even have my name on it. It just says, I bank with USAA, Navy Federal. Here's a four-digit card, and that's mainly for me to know which card it is. Because even if someone could get in my phone, they would just see a long line of encrypted code that means nothing. In fact, the way you can test this if you use Apple Pay is when you pay for something and ask your cashier for a receipt or ask them what card you used, and they won't know. They'll just get a crazy number, and they don't know. It don't even have their name. The authentication is all happening encrypted, so no one's going to ask you for an ID card or whatever. So this is really huge because it takes literally seconds. A lot of retailers are jumping on the bandwagon, and one of the hidden things are a lot of people have already put NFC terminals in their stores, and while they may not be official Apple Pay providers, it also works with those terminals in a lot of instances too. So it's more trial and error if they're not official Apple Pay because it's NFC and it still registers the transaction. So it's a really huge thing to be able to not have to carry your cards around. There's no risk of theft and you know of any identity theft or even your physical cards being stolen. And we're getting to a point where the only reason why I carry my credit and debit cards around now that I have Apple Pay, is because of the fact that there's still some places I go that don't have Apple Pay. But the moment that changes, but once I can start purchasing gas, it's pretty much over for my cards.
Well, you mentioned how big Apple Pay is. I think that one of the big announcements, and to me it was pretty much the highlight. Whereas I thought that all the engineering around the MacBook would have been the highlight for me today. But before I say this, I want to out you. I want to out you. So for those who managed to get the last four digits of his card, his name is Augustus Jerome Cumberbatch. That's his name. You find those four digits, Augustus Jerome Cumberbatch. That's
And guess what? It still won't help you because even because even the traditional credit card theft, you still need the whole thing, the expiration date, and the code on the back.
so you're making me laugh. So people think that's actually not your real name. That's his real name, Augustus. Not
Hey, it is
not
what it
Augustus.
is. That's what my parents thought was a good
Royal.
name for
It was
me.
royal. All right, so this was one of the highlights, and during the event, I think this is when I really started interacting with folks, especially on Twitter. By the way, if you want to ask Darth Geconius a question, you can shoot us a tweet at the Black Geeks. That's the Black Geeks. If I don't need to spell any of that for any of you guys. The
Maybe.
Black
You never know. No, please, please spare us.
TheBlackGeeks. And follow us on Twitter. You send us a tweet to at the Black Geeks. I'm monitoring the feed. If you hashtag TBG, that's Triangle Bravo
Don't do it.
Green. I don't know. That's your job.
Tango Bravo Golf.
Thank you. Podcast. You put that hashtag in. We'll try to answer your
Papa
question.
Oscar Delta Charlie Alpha Sierra Tango.
Okay, thank you. So I want to talk about Research Kit. Of the many things I expect Apple to do, I expect Apple to talk about the amazing technology that they bring in terms of the hardware. I definitely did not see this coming with the announcement about the Research Kit, and it's one of those things that we've talked about online medical, and we know that there are a number of devices out there to track your health and well-being. But what they presented today with Research Kit was just fascinating. And if you really sit back and think of the ramifications of having software that communicates your health and well-being to your medical professionals, but also if you're a person that is suffering from some form of illness or disease or infection or whatever it is, that you can participate in studies and basically provide your feedback to them. I think one of the examples they gave was regarding Parkinson's patients, that they can perform tests for researchers. And that's really, when you really think about the possibilities that this opens up. I mean, granted, I'm sure there's a whole issue around safety and security and privacy that has to be dealt with, and I'm sure that with how secure Dr. Koenig has told me Apple Pay is, that's not going to be a problem. Um, but if you think about, if you have that many users, if you have X many millions of users, and of those millions of users, maybe 250,000 are afflicted with some form of health illness, whether it's high blood pressure or, like they said, Parkinson's, or um,
Diabetes.
yeah, diabetes, Crohn's, who knows? And you figure that now participating in scientific research is just as simple as an app that's on your phone. How far can we really push scientific advances? So, Econis, I mean, the research kit is really, really a big deal, not only for Apple, but in all honesty, for humanity. It's actually a pretty significant advance.
It's funny. No one in the Apple rumor mill, people who try to read the tea leaves, saw this coming. This was essentially their one more thing, thing. And a lot of people didn't get it at first. And I was sitting there looking at it, and I felt like Joe Biden, like, I wanted to lean in somebody's ear and say, "This is a big, at the deal," because it was huge. And I think it's funny because it's not sexy, it's not just a new product, so it's not going to get anywhere near the press time any other the presentation got. But it was really huge from a scientific research, and I think when they did the video, of course, you were watching the slides, so you didn't get to see all the actual video in the stream. They did a video where one of the doctors that was interviewed, she was making a comment about how traditionally when they do research, she sent out like 5,000 or so, feelers for, participation, and she gets something like a couple hundred. And she was saying now with this, with them announcing that there's been 700 million iPhones sold, and Apple in I think the last year did double the amount of everybody else combined. It's a safe bet that the majority of people gonna in any 10 people, several of those people are gonna have iPhones. Now, to be able to reach your patients, it's just like you said, this is not even an Apple thing. This is a scientific research thing, and this is one of those rare instances where I truly, truly, truly wish Apple and Google had a tighter partnership where they could share that type of functionality amongst devices, because this is one of those things that could really benefit humanity on a larger scale. Having that real-time data. If you've ever worked in any field where you had to collect metrics, statistics, you had any research or studies, you understand that the value of Research Kit. And just to show you how big it is, Apple confirmed two things during the presentation. A, They will not get your data. It's literally between you and the person that set up the study. And B, it's open source. So it's not going to be, you have to be a particular research company that's partnered with Apple to get in on this. Basically, anybody who has the skills and the talent will be able to create these things to help you participate. So my question would be, where does it end? We don't even know how far this can go. And like with most app development on any platform, you know, what you see originally when it launches is just a surface. We don't really know how far this thing is going to go. And some of the things that were not mentioned during the research kit is how the data can be captured. Now, they did show examples of the Parkinson's app where there'll be tests on the iPhone and of course the iPad and et cetera, where you can do these different, voice and visual tests and touch tests. But what they didn't mention is the fact that the combined with the Apple Watch that we'll be able to collect biometrics data like heartbeat, heart rate, that type of stuff. And there's more that the Apple Watch can actually do, but they had to scale it back because of HIPAA and different health laws. And in order to get it certified, it would have made a lot of a headache. But there are also, like they mentioned, an asthma study. They're doing an asthma study in New York right now where they have Bluetooth um, uh, asthma pumps that'll be able to send the data to the phone. So there's a lot of stuff. We don't even know how far this is going to go. The research kit to me was probably one of the biggest announcements, if not the biggest announcement, actually, from a purely scientific, technical, where can we go in humanity type standpoint. And if we're getting any closer to Star Trek, this is just a, we're getting closer to the tricorder than with this type of stuff.
God bless Gene Roddenberry. God, tell you, man, such a
You
visionary.
plant those seeds, you never know.
Yeah, exactly. And again, I'm gonna get into a comment that they made a little bit later. So, again, I just can't say enough about this. If you didn't have a chance to take a look at the presentation, definitely go back and look at the portion about the research kit because I think Dr. Konius made a very important point that this should not be technology that's limited to Apple. Although, I think that we all have very are sensitive about protection of our privacy and our content, and we never want those type of things to get out. So Geekonis is always pointing out to me how insecure all these other devices are, and I think that, but we're living in an era where hackers are getting better and companies are also getting stronger in their encryptions and their security protocols. But this is something that's going to be very significant because you know this is the technology that can change humanity. This is the technology that can make us healthier. I mean, even if you just want to talk about the personal aspect of tracking your own personal health and well-being, anything that improves quality of life is definitely a good thing. And this is going to be this is significant. So definitely read up on research kit, understand what it is, and understand the impact that it can have going forward.
One more thing on
Yeah,
this
sure,
subject, Rob,
sure, go
before
ahead.
you move on. I wanted to say you brought up this, and it's a great topic to segue into real quick about yes, it would be great if all of these technology were cross-platform, but the reality is, and this is not us, though it may seem like a veiled jab, um, this is absolutely the best platform for something like this because of Apple's closed platform and the hardware they've created within the iPhone and the Apple Watch to protect your data and security. It just would not work on another platform. And case in point, I recently just updated my iPhone to the latest beta of iOS 8.3. And to do that, means I lost all the stored credit card data, all my health information that's in the phone, completely wiped because the data is stored on their own chips in the hardware. So there's a separate chip just for Apple Pay data. There's a separate chip just for health data. They do not communicate with the rest of the phone. So when I restored the phone and I put in my iCloud information and restored my backup, the only thing that came back was like my apps and my phone settings and stuff like that. but my actual data, like my credit card and stuff, and my fingerprint data and stuff, I had to do it all over from scratch. So every time I restore this phone, it's a little bit of a headache because I got to re-put all my fingerprints back in. I got to re-put all my health information in, what my blood type is. I had to re-put all my credit cards back in there, but it's for my own good, and that's just proof that when Apple says that your data is secure on these devices, it is because it's not even part of the Apple ecosystem. It's completely separate to that device, and it gets wiped every time you restore the phone, and it's a little bit of a headache, but it is what it is.
Yeah, and that just goes to speak to the level of safety and privacy that Apple has built into their hardware, and their commitment to protecting the consumers, and I think they've been fairly consistent in that. So let's get to one of Geekonius's nergasm moments here, and as a tech head myself, I've got to say that I was very impressed. And I mean, and we're living in such an incredible era where we're seeing technology, steadily become smaller and lighter and faster. I'm going to just run through a couple of the major technical things so that Geekonius can focus his comments where he feels the biggest bang is. So let's talk MacBook, folks. The new MacBook was unveiled today. Uh, they said that this thing is only 2 pounds, lightest MacBook ever. Um, they're offering it in several different colors. Geekonis, you'll have to explain to me. I know. Nicely to me. On the show once, you talked about why they limited color so much, and that's one thing I want you to kind of explain to the people. But they talked about the silver, the gold, and the space gray. But when we talk about just the technology that's in it, talking about the individual LED under every key, so there's a uniform glow. Each key is 4 times more stable. And has a 17% larger surface area. They changed the butterfly mechanisms underneath so that it's more stable, more precise, and 40% thinner. The new MacBook it reduces, looks like about by 4 millimeters from 17.3 to 13.1. And then this whole Force Touch trackpad. And I definitely think that's Geekonis. That's one thing you can explain to the folks why this Force trackpad is so innovative in that it's going to be pressure sensitive into to the different things that you're going to do. The 67%, which to me really blew me away. A 67% smaller logic board, absolutely incredible than the 11-inch MacBook Air. So I don't, and I could go on and on with the Retina display and the one thing that absolutely blew my mind and that I was totally fascinated with um, was this concept of the USB-C connector, where you basically get your power, your data transfer, and your video driver all through one freaking port. What a concept! I mean, that is. I always wondered if that was possible because you've seen some adapters for USB for video. We know we can do data through it. You know you can power things through it. But being that you have one port that does it all, just the just the possibilities are absolutely incredible. So I'm gonna stop because there's so much more that I can talk about in the engineering of the thing. But I want to let Darky Conius loose on the Mac on the new MacBook. Darky Conius.
I need 1 second. I have to illustrate something real quick. Just give me 1 second. I got to show everyone this.
Don't stand up. Don't just stand up too much. You say, okay, see, I'm going to talk. So, okay, see, you got to see the flash. You got to see the whole. I mean, not a flash. He didn't flash you guys. It's just that he's supposed to be wearing a black geek shirt, but I think they're all at the cleaners. You just can't get. The clone cleaners just aren't nearly as efficient as your local cleaners. So you need to make sure. See, I'm trying to talk so that it stays on me. And not on him. Are you back now?
Yes, I want to show everybody something here because sometimes you have to see this to get an idea of what they did. This is a first generation iPad Air. You see how thin this is. This is an iPad Air, first generation. So if you have an iPad Air 2, you know it's even thinner than this. This thing is extremely thin. It's extremely light. In fact, it's literally. I'm looking at the thickness right now. It's very. Very thin. I don't even have to go into the actual measurements because we don't know millimeters in America that well anyway. But this screen is 9.7 inches across. So it's about 10-inch tablet, right? This new MacBook is literally slightly slightly bigger than this, and just a little bit thicker, just a hair's breadth thicker. This is freaking insane. For comparison, even further comparison, I've got to hold up my iPhone 6. This is the iPhone 6. So just seeing how thin this device is. In my mind, what you're basically seeing is this new MacBook is essentially an iPad Air first gen with a keyboard attachment. In fact, the screen on the new MacBook Air, on the new MacBook, is not even as thick as the iPad Air. It's thinner than this, just the actual screen in of itself. So the little bit of thickness you are getting is from the keyboard attachment. What makes this thing so amazing, just from an engineering feat, is not so much the thickness, which is very thin. It's actually lighter as well. If you happen to have ever seen a MacBook Air weighs next to nothing. You can literally hold it with 3 fingers and type on it. It's very thin. In fact, the first generation in 2010, if you famously remember, Steve Jobs introduced it by taking it out of one of those business envelopes. You remember that? And that was the commercial. You would take it out of the envelope. That's how thin it is. This new MacBook is actually almost a whole pound lighter than a MacBook Air, to give you some perspective. And the technologies they had to invent to just, I almost feel like I'm in danger of sounding like Johnny Ivy because I feel like I'm going to go into this long thing about engineering and the beauty and all this other stuff. But the thing is that you have to remember that they had to create new technologies just to get this to work. Chief among them, as Baba Rob pointed out, was the way the keyboard mechanism had changed. It went from a scissor hinge thing to a whole butterfly for uniform pressing, that allowed them to make it thinner. They got rid of the whole LED thing that pushes up on all the letters and gave them individual LEDs. They made the screen thinner. They reduced the size of the entire logic board and threw the fan out. The thing doesn't even have a fan. And some people are already concerned about overheating. And I tell people all the time, you use these things all the time. Do they burn your hands up, or you're like, are they like on fire? There's no fans on this thing. There's no real ventilation. There's, if you can call these little holes at the bottom ventilation, but there's no fans. People use smartphones and tablets every day. And, with quad core processing and GPUs, the iPhone 6, for instance, is a desktop class PC CPU in here, 64-bit and everything. So they've done all of this in a nice clean package, and it's short of amazing. I mean, just the engineering feat that they pulled off here. It's a Retina display, so you're going to have a great screen, and the singular port. I must say, I've heard the rumor about the singular port. I've been following that rumor for a couple of months. I wasn't sure Apple was going to actually do that. In fact, they did do it. How I feel about it, I was a little skeptical at first. I thought that was maybe not a good choice. But as the day went on and more knowledge came out, there's actually going to be this new USB-C standard. Just discuss what it is first off. It's basically a new port standard that every type of connection can go through it. The way you charge the device, it's a power charger, USB, HDMI, VGA, anything that you're currently using. There's no word on Ethernet yet. Can be used through that singular port. And Apple already has a device adapter on their website at $79, and it comes in different configurations where you can plug it into the USB-C, and the output is like 3 to 4 different ports. So if you were wondering, some people brought up the idea of how am I going to, what if I'm charging it, what if I have to put something in there for USB? You can have this adapter and you can simultaneously charge it and have it in there. One of the things I want to tell people that functionality isn't meant to be a use case. One of the things I have to always remind people when you get on these geek podcasts and these shows and stuff, people always give, I'm not trying to down anybody out there, but I've seen a lot of tweets today and I was just shaking my head because we have a lot of people in the geek world who give opinions, but aren't often IT professionals. And I'm not dissing anybody for having an opinion, but a lot of times when I say this is why Apple likely did this, I'm leaning on my IT background. And the reason why things are done in IT. And I can guarantee you that the design behind this USB-C port, though it seems unorthodox now, was based on use cases. And the reality is, if you were to look at how people use similar devices, and I'll give you a case in point, Apple sells a gazillion iPads a year. One of the biggest complaints about the iPad since inception, people have been mocking it because you can't put a USB thing in there. You can't put an SD card in there. Has that stopped iPads from selling? Has it stopped iPad from being the number one tablet in the world? No, it hasn't, because the technology has evolved to where most people share and use data without the need for SD cards. These have always been nice little perks that Samsung and other people put in there. But when you look at the broad range of people who use technology, SD cards, USB things were not that important. So this USB-C thing to me is right on the level of when Apple first stopped putting CD drives in the MacBooks. People went insane when they found out that the MacBook Air didn't have a CD port, and then the MacBook Retina didn't have a CD drive. And come to find out, if you actually think about it, how many people actually use a CD right now? How often do you take a CD out and burn something or put it in there on the whole? A lot of people don't use it. Um, a lot of people are using cloud technology. A lot of people are getting data through their apps. A lot of people are emailing each other's data. And our wireless networks are strong. Our mobile networks are strong. So there isn't any real need for this type of stuff. I have at least 4 USB drives on my desk right now. I have a USB drive here. I have an SD drive here.
That's because you're a hardware glutton.
I am. I
Yeah.
am. I'll admit that. But I rarely use them. Rarely, if ever. So the issue is, the question is, how am I gonna have this MacBook with this one port, and it needs to be charged? The use case is, first off, the thing has like 12-hour battery life. They say 10-hour, but in my experience, these Apple devices tend to last longer than what they say. This is literally for watching videos and everything and different types of use cases. You might drain the battery, but for the most part, if you're out working on this thing, and the only type of work you're going to be using this thing for is internet browsing, email, documents, that type of thing. You're not using this device to play video games, though I'm certain you could given the hardware specs. You won't be, playing Crisis, but you'll be playing games if you really wanted to. You could play your Civilization, maybe your Sims, because when you look at it, we're talking about a processor. Though it says 1.1 gigahertz, it has the Intel Boost up to 2.9, which is more than enough gigahertz for most gaming. I mean, we have, like I said, smartphones who push some hardcore graphics. It also has the Intel Graphics 6000 chipset, which is a very competent graphics chipset. So this is a competent laptop, but you're not using this. This is for your writers, your students, your everyday consumer.
Hmm.
So the statistical odds of you having to charge it and put a thumb drive in at the same time is probably not going to happen. It's likely going to already be charged, and you're only going to be using that port as needed. And like I previously mentioned, most people are not going to be needing to use USB sticks anyway, and especially with Apple devices have AirDrop. So a lot of times, if you're in a community of people that are using Apple devices, if I want to share a file and everybody in the classroom have an Apple device, I just hit AirDrop. Everybody's computer pops up on the screen, and everybody can get that file at the same time. There's no need to put it on a thumb drive and hand it over unless they have a Windows machine. But even then, Windows now have iCloud Drive. So it's like, it's the idea of needing, I think people are just afraid of moving on with technology. So I think it was very ingenious what they did.
Yeah, I think that's always a problem that people are just a little bit afraid of change. I mean, you talk about use case, and I was surprised to hear that comment that folks actually balked at the concept. I mean, the one thing that we know, I mean, I love my Lenovo Y20 very much, but I had
It's an amazing laptop. Look, I'm an Apple fan, but I have to give credit where credit is due. Lenovo put together a machine that, as much as I wanted to hate it, I had to take a step back and say, this is a powerful machine.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a beast. But one thing that I had in my old Dell was 4 USB ports, and so I did get an expander for this one. So I got it. So now I've got six in total. And it works well with me. But I mean, if you look at the technology makes a lot of sense because if you start standardizing, you can go anywhere and plug into anything. You don't have to worry about dongles and running out of ports or anything like that because you've got a smaller port and you're able to do multiple things on it. It makes a lot of sense. So I think that that's a big plus. And you think about what we were doing before USB. I mean, dear God, USB just really changed the game and just opened you up to a lot of different things. So I think we have to be really open minded and accepting of new technologies. Before I move on, there was one very interesting very techy, very geeky thing. And I know that we're getting close to the 1 hour mark, and I want to try to keep the show to an hour. We're probably going to go a little bit over because I know Geekonis is going to have a lot to talk about the watch. But Geekonis, could you briefly explain? And I apologize if I'm putting you on the spot here. But one of the fun facts about the MacBook is that this is a fanless unit. And
Hmm.
I think a lot of folks in the technology era, and for those of us who use computers and who are builders, I'm a builder, you're a builder, fans and cooling, and we're even talking about some things that are liquid cooled nowadays. How is Mac able to pull this fanless unit off?
It's actually it's funny because King Face, he's not with us tonight. He called me today to get the recap because he didn't get to see it, and he said, "How are you going to do fanless?" And I said, "Look, you use an iPad and an iPhone every day. It never burns up in your hand. So it's fanless. Your tablets and your smartphones are fanless CPUs. They are. They're fanless computers. And these devices, whether it's, I don't care if it's Android, Windows, or iOS, these are some powerful machines. In fact, people are using the Surface, and they always talk about how powerful the Surface is, how powerful the Surface is. These are some powerful devices, quad core CPUs. NVIDIA has the Tegra NVIDIA chip in there. You play some of these games on these tablets. If this was 10 years ago, you would think your hand would be burning up, trying to use these tablets and these smartphones with no fan and no cooling mechanism other than what passive cooling they have. So it shouldn't shock anybody that we're at the point where we can develop a laptop that does not have a fan. It's essentially a larger iPad, as I gave the example earlier. It's just a larger iPad with a computer on it. Yeah, with a keyboard on it, excuse me. Yes, it has a more, and I say that because even the iPad screen is Retina, right? So all they did was enlarge the screen to 12 inches and add a keyboard, and it's about the same size as the iPad. There's nothing really there, and down to the processor is a lot more powerful than the iPad processor. But one of the key things people forget is that it only uses 5 watts of power. Intel, as a chip maker, has done some amazing things in the last 10 years when it comes to CPU design. And I used to be a huge AMD fan. They were doing some things that were cheap and they were economical. You were getting a lot of cores, a lot of gigahertz to build your computers. But I eventually had to just go ahead and say, look, you have to go with Intel because Intel has managed to make chips that are really small, really energy efficient, and at the same time very powerful. So we're now at a place where Apple can pull this off. And it's not just Apple. I believe Dell has already went fanless. They released a fanless laptop, I believe, a couple of months ago to try to draw first blood. Because Apple was actually supposed to release this laptop last year. Intel just wasn't ready to give them the. They had some delays with this chip design, and Apple requires a lot of chips, and so they weren't ready to release the chip and give it to Apple in a sufficient quantity to make it be able to be designed and released. Which goes to show you that Intel had this technology now for a couple of years, because different iterations of this chip was already being used at Apple in preparation for this version. So it should shock no one. And in fact, you should wait till the next one come out. Just wait how much more powerful that one is going to be.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's one thing that if you haven't learned anything at this point, whether it's with Apple products or SD drives, I mean, and being around computers and technologies as long as we have, um, we've seen it. We've seen. I mean, we remember back in the day when a 250 gigabyte hard drive was that was
250 gigabytes,
$500. It was like,
dude.
oh God, it's
I remember when I got my first 20 gigabyte, I thought I was doing something.
Yo, when we got our first like 100 megabyte one,
Yeah, I download games on the Xbox now that's 40 gigabytes. You know.
right? Because what? Yeah, I won't say I accidentally. I decided to download the old Dragon Age. So I was like, oh, let me go see what all this hype is about. And when I looked in the file, it was 141 gigs. I was
Yeah.
like, you gotta be kidding me. That's obscene. I think that's bigger than Skyrim.
Can I
Anyway,
can I say one more thing about the price? Um,
I was
it,
actually going to mention the price. That was the next thing I was going to
okay,
mention. Go
go
ahead.
ahead. I'll let you go.
Oh, okay. All right. So, what they were saying is that according to the presentation today, the new MacBook is going to ship on April the 10th, and that they are looking at a price point of 12.99, so
Mhm.
$1,299, and the bigger version with it looks like it's a bigger processor. Let's see what changes in this. Oh, I see. All right, so yeah, it's going to be with the bigger SSD. It's a 512 gigabyte SSD. They're going to be putting that for 15.99. So, and so I mean, that's pretty much on line with the typical price point for the MacBooks, isn't it?
Yes and no. Here's the thing. That base configuration, and I was telling King Faces not even 2 hours ago, they actually shocked me because one of my complaints with the MacBook Air, which starts at I believe $800 for the 11-inch, I've always felt like they didn't give you much for the entry level. And what I say by much, I don't personally believe, and this is an informal buyer's guide, that you should ever buy a MacBook Air, a MacBook Retina, MacBook Retina, or any PC that doesn't have user expandable RAM or hard drive
Mm-hmm.
unless it has a minimum of 256 gigabytes of hard drive space and 8 gigabytes of RAM. That's just a firm belief of mine.
Mm-hmm.
I've been saying this for at least 3 years at this point. Sometimes I'll tell people they can skimp on the hard drive, maybe go with the 128, but the RAM is absolute 8 gigabytes. You're gonna, and I know people who have MacBook Airs that have the base 128 4 gigabyte configuration, and the thing is fast as I don't know what, but they always hit a brick wall when they start opening multiple applications because of the limited RAM. So what shocked me is that this thing base configuration has 256 gigabytes and 8 gigabytes of RAM. And it's a beautiful thing. It comes in three colors. This is a huge thing for Apple's fans. I'm going to tell you this right now. The MacBook has been looking exactly the same, more or less, since 2008. The only thing that has changed since 2008 is how thin the MacBook is. But functionally, if I held up a 2008 MacBook Pro, and I'm not going to get up and start walking around the room, start pulling MacBooks off the shelves,
Thank you.
you know, versus a modern Retina, on the surface, you would not be able to tell a difference other than look. Now, there was a standard MacBook back in the day that expired in 2010 that did come in white and black variants. And the black ones always sold out. People loved the black MacBooks, but they were underpowered compared to the Pro. So this idea following the iPhone and the iPad now with this gold, white, and slate, as a good friend of ours who always follow us on the show mentioned on Twitter, he said the gold one is going to sell out crazy. I mean, we all know this. The idea of and they got rid of the LED Apple logo. That's another thing people didn't notice. Is now like this shiny aluminum. It literally looks like an iPad or an iPhone. It is going to sell out, but I think that's a good price point for this device. And even if it's not right for you, I'm already reading some technical reports from Wired and other people who've had a hands-on. And first chance I get, I'm running to the Apple Store to play with it. They're already having issues with the Force Touch and the keyboard, and I think it has more to do with the fact you're just not used to it. But it was mentioned that the Force Touch keypad it reminds them more of a touchscreen, and it's getting and they're having issues with getting used to not having that tactile feedback. Currently on the MacBooks, when you push it, you can actually push it in and depress it. So the idea of just tapping it hard is messing with people already. So we'll see. But then again, another thing that's not being widely reported, at least not on the same level, is they updated the entire MacBook line. So even if this MacBook isn't for you still now have more powerful MacBook Airs and MacBook Pros to choose from because they upgraded them all to latest Intel processors. They all have the base Intel 6000 graphics. So along with these new processors, you should get better battery life, better performance, um, all around. So and the configurations have updated as well. So you're going to see a lot more 256 gigabyte SSDs, flash RAM. So all across the board, the whole MacBook line got an upgrade. I'm really excited about this. Um, you know, I think it was an amazing reveal. Personally, I still think 12 inches is too small, but Apple normally does this. This is their first blow. I give it 2 refresh cycles, and all the MacBooks will look like this. And it'll probably come in, I would say if it were me, I would do maybe 11, 12, and 13 inch because that's essentially what they did. There's already an 11-inch MacBook Air and a 13-inch MacBook Air, so they're already. So I would just go ahead and change the Air line completely, and that's probably what Apple's going to do. Um, I'd like to see them work on the larger end. They stopped making the 17-inch, I think, in 2010, 2011. A lot of people are upset about that, and it looks like the 15-inch they're trying to get rid of. But if they, with this technology being able to go thin and light, I think it's prime time for Apple to bring back a 17-inch MacBook um, and a 15-inch that's really good. So this is the first blow. I guarantee you by the next update cycle, you're going to have larger sizes and um, different price points.
Well, that's interesting, Econius. I mean, I wonder. I guess it speaks to the question is how MacBook users how they work because I mean obviously because of the work I do and because a lot of times I'm working on spreadsheets I always I don't get anything smaller than a 15 although I have used an 11 and the 11 works actually fairly well and it's extremely portable but obviously for my own personal, use, I got something that I can game on, that I can do spreadsheets on. I guess the question is, if you're making a small, lightweight device that you can pretty much throw in a purse, in a backpack, in a briefcase, under your arm, and something light and you just go with. I think that going to a 15 or 17 is somewhat of a contradiction to the portability. But I'm sure there's some people who probably want one. Those who do graphic design, and I'm sure that there are some applications for it. But it just seems to me that having that larger format machine is a contradiction to what they're trying to achieve by making it thin and lighter and smaller.
Here's the thing. I used to own a 17-inch MacBook Pro, and that thing was a beast. It weighed about 8 pounds, and even then, it was still like yay thick. yay big. It wasn't a physically imposing device. Unless you've seen it next to other MacBook Pros, you'd be like, "Oh God, this is Papa Bear by a long shot." What I think people like me would like to see is not so much for the portability, but to be able to make it manageable. Like even the 17-inch Pro in its heyday would still fit in a book bag. It just felt like you had several big textbooks in your book bag and it was heavy as hell. But if using modern technology, they can cut that weight in half easily. They could, upgrade it in such a way, it would just be a much lighter version. So I think that would make it portable in that regard. Um, Definitely though, I just have an issue with 12 inches. I don't know what that is. To me, I just felt like it should have been 13. I think 13 is the sweet spot for portability. I imagine that, and I'm gonna look it up when I get to the Apple Store. I imagine that the 12 inch is similar to the 13 inch because if anyone ever seen a MacBook Air, one of the biggest complaints about the MacBook Air is it had that thick gray border around the glass. I think that Apple just went edge to edge, and by doing so, allowed them to shrink what would have probably been a 13-inch or nearly a 13-inch MacBook
I
Pro,
think you're probably
MacBook
right.
Air in size. So it probably feels more like a 13-inch in actual usage.
Hmm. You're
But
probably.
but I'm going sight unseen with that prediction. So
I'm going to say the other thing I thought about is that those who are using the 12, if they needed a bigger monitor, they could just, looking at getting into some of my occupation, looking at workplace strategies, the trend is leaning more toward lighter, faster, smaller, and that you can work and move on the go, and that if you have to do serious sit down, large format work, you sit down at a station and you sync up. And whether you plug into your display port or whatnot, and then you use the big screen for when you do intricate, bigger work. So I think that maybe a lot would have to do. But I will be surprised. I hear what you're saying. I'll be very surprised if we do see a 15 or 16 come out in the near future at
I,
all. I would
I,
be
I would
terribly
say
surprised.
definitely a 15. And again, and I
I'd
tell
be
you why.
surprised.
Apple's strategy is they introduce um, a new MacBook design, and it gives you an idea of where they're going in their design direction, and then they slowly phase out the other line. When the MacBook Air came out, I was wanting for. I said, look, this is where the MacBook Pros are going. They're going toward the MacBook Air. So then they came out with the Retina. The Retina was more powerful than the Air MacBook, but it was not too much, bigger than a MacBook Air. They phased out the regular MacBook Pro. So if you notice, when they said MacBook Pro today, they meant the Retina. They don't even use the Retina name anymore because they phased out all the other MacBook Pros. So now the big deal was, when are the MacBook Airs going to go Retina? So here we go. They call this the new MacBook. They didn't call it the new MacBook Air. They didn't call it the new MacBook Pro. They called it a new MacBook, which is something else people have not picked up on. If Apple drops the name to it, this was one of the first things I noticed when I picked up the iPhone 6. Every iPhone box prior to that had you could see the iPhone, it was distinguished which iPhone this was. The iPhone 6 came in a nondescript box and it just said iPhone. When Apple does that with their naming conventions, that means they are trying to uniform the line to a uniform design to make it look a certain way. They just started this Air stuff, so we'll see where it goes. But they call this the new MacBook. That to me means as the technology, as the technology advances, that they're going to eventually make the rest of the line look like this. So they're
Hmm.
probably they're going to stop at 15. People have to have their 15 inches, but I guarantee you, um, next year or the year after, there's going to be a 15-inch MacBook that looks very similar to this MacBook, but it may be a little bit thicker because of the internal components. Because you're just going to have a fan for the i7. You just,
Yeah, you just
I
have
don't
to.
think, I don't think Intel's that good. But who knows? Intel may very well come out with a quad core i7 in 2 years that don't need a fan. We'll see. Um,
Hey, AMD and Nvidia are doing the thing.
yeah,
So
anything is
anything can happen.
possible. You know, we got
Anything can
voodoo
happen.
going on in technology these days.
Woo,
I,
voodoo, voodoo.
I would have told you, 5 years ago that you couldn't make something this thin and light.
Yeah.
Out
Who
the
knew?
window. We're almost at glass now. We're
Yep.
we're getting to this point. We're going to be like Avatar soon, just in the air.
No,
And
Minority Report.
and that
Minority Report.
technology already actually exists.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
just
it
not
does.
practical yet.
Yeah, it is. All right, so let's get to the last one. I know
The
that
main event.
the main event, folks. Main event. I know that everyone is tuned in for this one.
Yeah, uh-huh.
I know that everyone is. I know everyone. I'm just watching. I'm watching our number of viewers skyrocket as we get closer to the moment. Yeah, hopefully these are the West Coast viewers logging in because I'm sure East Coast are like these dudes are crazy. Ladies and gentlemen, the Apple Watch debuted today. We knew it was coming. We knew Apple was going to bring the funk, and I definitely don't think they disappointed. Uh, this they came with something with different looks, something that appeals to absolutely everyone, and it does so. It talk about a multitasking device. This watch. I feel Geekonius, I'm having a hard time.
What?
I'm saying all this positive stuff. I'm trying. No, I'm not faking the funk, but it's just like it's just weird for me to talk so positively after my history.
You
Um,
never watch these events. That's part of the
yeah,
problem.
I know, but
You finally watch one, and now you see
no, no,
what
no,
we've
no,
been
no.
talking about.
No. I am always excited about cool technology, and honestly, this is really
But the
cool
events
technology.
are different because you see the engineering stuff. And I don't care if you hate Apple. If you're a tech person, you cannot watch these events and not be like, that's cool. If nothing else, if nothing else, you should be like, okay, Google, stop resting on your laurels. Let's see what you're gonna do to counter
Right.
this.
Stop playing around. So
Yeah.
so what we saw with the Apple Watch is something that is such an interactive tool and is basically a very close companion to your iPhone, and even can do some things as a standalone. It does everything from play your music, controlling the music from your iPhone, giving you weather. Has a number of different faces. It tracks your activity. We knew that it was going to track your activity. We knew that you'd be able to also send and receive your calls from it. You know that you get text message notifications. And it's interesting. One aspect of it, and my timing was probably a little bad when I was controlling the Twitter feed. Um, was just that it also reminds you that hey, you need to do a little exercise, you need to get up, you need to move around. I mean, and so this becomes a companion to you as well. For those of us who are news hounds,
Her.
it also gives you notifications about breaking news that comes across. One note that I found really interesting, the fact that you could raise your wrist. I'm just reading. It says raise your wrist and say, "Hey Siri," to do all kinds of things with your Apple Watch. Geekonius, okay. Well, let me just finish, and then I'm gonna let Geekonius loose on this thing. So it also syncs with your Apple Pay, and you'll be able to not only buy your, as they said, buy your lunches with it as well, but you'll be able to even unlock your hotel room with the SPG app. And I could go on and on and on. I mean, there's just so many different functionalities that this watch is bringing to the table, and it definitely did not disappoint whatsoever. Geekonius, this is a big freaking deal. It's not the research kit. This is a big, pretty big freaking deal. This Apple Watch little
I
device they got going here.
I just want to go on record. When Apple first announced the Apple Watch, I did not want one. I felt like I was gonna wait, see how this thing pan out. This was actually supposed to be the first Apple technology in a long time since the iPad where I was just like, it's not for me. Um, and truth be told, I do that occasionally. I don't go out and get the latest MacBook. My everyday MacBook is a 2011 MacBook Pro. And I still, as great as these MacBooks, and to Apple fans out there who might think I'm a traitor, even as great as the Apple refresh today and the new MacBook, as nice and beautiful it is, I do not feel the urge to change out my MacBook Pro at all. The Apple Watch, I really was like, I don't get it. I am now a convinced believer, not because of this, but I've been reading the reports since the first presentation, and the more we learn about this device, the more interesting, the more wonderful, the more as a tech person, the greater it is going to be for you, especially if you're already in the Apple ecosystem. My mother recently got, I think it's the LG one. Yeah, because I would have remembered it was the Moto, because the Moto was actually a fine piece of technology. The Moto 360, I think, is beautiful. But the LG one, she's all happy about it. And I was kind of just like, okay, And I told her she's going to regret that in a couple of months. So we'll see if she's ready to eat crow when I show up with my Apple Watch. But the beautiful thing about the Apple Watch is outside of features, we learned some stuff today that people had been questioning for quite some time. Like, for instance, the battery life was revealed today. And even then, Apple didn't tell everything. You had to research for it. So, for instance, they announced that it's an 18-hour battery life, but there had been a rumor that there was a standby mode, and there is a standby mode. And the watch can actually go 72 hours, 72 plus hours actually, in low power standby mode, which basically means your watch will act like a watch versus this crazy technical device. So, like anything in technology that has a battery, the more stuff you do, the faster it's going to drain. The less stuff you do, the faster the battery is going to last. This is even with electrical cars. I mean, so I know people complain about the charging, but if you're not one of them people that's going to be playing music on your wrist or talking on your wrist or doing any of those stuff, your watch is probably going to last more than a day. So that was one of the big things that was confirmed. The waterproof thing was confirmed. It's not waterproof, it's water resistant. So some people might be upset that they can't wear their watch and go swimming. Personally, I think that's an extremely small percentage of the population that feels like they need to have a watch they can go swimming in. Tim Cook did say in previous interviews that he can wear his watch in the shower, though Apple hasn't hardcore confirmed that. And I think that's because Apple understands that the normal person can probably take a shower with their watch and there'd be no problems. But you do have those people who like to take all the hot water in the house and it'll be there for like hours and actually mess up the watch, so they don't want to take any ownership for that. Another thing that was confirmed, at least for me, is how the Apple Pay works. I had no clue. I had different hints of how it might work, but when I actually found out how it works, I said, this goes to show you that for what all the smack Apple gets, they have to be recognized as an innovator in the tech world, well beyond what people think. People love to diss Apple and call Apple fans ice sheep and Apple doesn't innovate. If you just hear the technology that I'm about to, it just completely floored me. And I know about these products. I didn't even know it did this. So basically, the way Apple Pay works on the Apple Watch, this is really cool. Um, right now, the Apple Watch can be used with any iPhone 5, so 5, 5C, 5S, and of course the iPhone 6. Now, the difference with Apple Pay on the iPhone 6, of course, is you use your thumb without a watch. The iPhone 5 does not have that capability. The 5S does have the fingerprint, but again, the thing that makes Apple Pay is not necessarily the thumbprint, it's the secure chip in the phone that keeps this encrypted data. That's only in the 6. What Apple Pay allows you to do on the watch is to use those devices because the authentication happens in the watch. The NFC is in the watch. So much like I talked about Apple Pay earlier with the iPhone, where when you go to checkout, you'll be able to, your phone will either, the card will either pop up automatically, or you can tap it and pull it up yourself. The Apple Watch will do the same exact thing. Now, the way the watch authenticates, and this comes from a question a follower of mine asked earlier during the presentation, what happens if someone steals my watch? Here's the thing. Whenever you put on the Apple Watch, you have to authenticate it with your iPhone for Apple Pay. The watch knows when you take the watch off. The moment you take that watch off, the authentication breaks. Every time you put the watch back on, you have to re-authenticate for the Apple Pay connectivity. That to me was freaking cool. I don't know, people might say, oh, you're really a geek, but to me, I thought that was amazing. The idea that I can have my iPhone now in my pocket somewhere, in my book bag. We still don't know the range. They have not confirmed it. Um, I'm imagining that the technology is at least equal to or greater than my wireless Beats headphones. And I've been toying around with that. I'm currently in the basement level of my house. I've toyed around with leaving my iPhone just sitting on my desk, and I've gone as far as the third floor of my house and still be using my headphones. So if I can get that range from the Bluetooth in my headset, I'm imagining that the watch would work similarly. Uh, they haven't discussed the range, but basically that is a key feature of the Apple Pay thing, that the authentication happens. And the way it happens, as I understand it, is on the iPhone 6, you would authenticate, of course, with your thumbprint. The same thing with the 5S, and with the 5 and 5C, you use your passcode or something, and you'll authenticate it, and then you push it on your Apple Watch to do the linkage. As far as what the Apple Watch can do, there's a ton of other features. Like there's apps to open up garage doors, there's to get notifications. One of the things that they haven't revealed is how much storage is on the actual watch itself. I've heard everything. I've heard everything from 4 GB to 8 GB. Apple has not revealed it, but when it says that you can play music on there, um, I was told, at least they've said it, that you can store music on the watch. So in order for you to store it, that means to me you have to have a minimum of 2 GB, like they used to have in the old iPod Shuffle, to be significant, to have music on your watch. Um, One of the key things is, and again, the range is important.
Tony,
Yes.
if I can interrupt you just for 1 second, it's very interesting when you talk about storage. If you couple that with the article that we tweeted out last week about the micro SD card that's 200 gigabytes, I mean, if you think about the technology is already there, the micro technology is already there. That this phone, this watch, could have a lot of storage. I mean, just potentially, maybe not now, but later, because storage technology has come so far that, you've got that. You figure, that'll fit inside of a watch of that size rather easily. So the possibilities are really, really endless as the technology of storage continues to advance.
Yes, but this is the one thing where Apple consistently fails. I have to just say that Apple is never going to do that because, from a business standpoint, they don't have to. Let's just be honest. They're still capitalism. They didn't become a $700 billion company, and as it was shared with us yesterday through Bison, an article in the Guardian, they may very well be a $1 trillion company after this watch. Apple's not going to get. I mean, theoretically, look, the base MacBook Air could have a 500 GB SSD in it. I mean, like you mentioned, look at the size of these chips. There's no reason why Apple still sells a 16 GB iPhone. No reason. That was one of my biggest complaints when the iPhone 6 came out. I thought the base model was going to be 32 GB, but they knew there was money to be made, that people would pay, damn near $700 for a phone that has a lot of technology that looks really good, but only has 16 GB of storage. So they're not going to invest in that type of storage for people that's going to buy it anyway. Let's just be honest. So I wouldn't be surprised if it had 8 GB of data of storage in it. I'd be really shocked.
Hmm.
And I think that's the main reason why Apple won't tell you how much space is in that phone, in that watch, because they know people are going to be highly pissed especially if you spend $10,000 for an edition watch. Again, I don't think people are buying that watch. The people that can buy that watch will buy it for storage, but it would have been a lot cooler if it had like a 32 gigabyte, data in there, and this thing really became a Get Smart or Spectre Gadget type device where you could really have your whole life on there if you wanted. Um,
Right.
One of the things though that I have to mention, there's a question in Twitter. You have a question?
You got 5 minutes. I'm just warning you right now. You're on the clock. We're gonna end this show at 12:45. We're doing around 90-minute show. So, and I do have one more thing to cover. So I'm just giving you your
Okay.
you are giving your five
Well,
minutes.
let me
So
address this question about privacy.
go right ahead.
Um, Privacy is well the other topic I was going to get on. It's they definitely follow to each other. Um, the one thing that Apple Watch is when you don't have it paired with your iPhone, it's essentially a watch with some extra features. Let's get that out the way right now. Most of the processing, most of the apps, most of the data still resides on your iPhone. Your iPhone is doing all the heavy lifting, and it's sending the data over their proprietary Bluetooth connection, their encrypted connection that's paired between the phone and the watch. That's where the data is coming from. So when it comes to privacy, none of that data is stored on your phone. Some of it is. We don't know if there's a secure element chip on the watch. I doubt that there is because of the way Apple Pay works. And it because you're not storing. There's no camera on the watch, so and there's no keyboard, so there's no way to. They're not asking you to manually put card data on the watch. So all that data is coming from the phone itself. And so it's a secure. It's being beamed over, and the encryption is coming out. So that's how all this stuff works, as well as your health data. Health Kit resides on your phone. What the biometrics that's being read on the watch is being sent to the phone for storage into the Health Kit app. So this is all encrypted channels paired with your watch. So that's how privacy works. That's how processing works. That's how your notifications are going to work. It's all essentially coming from the phone. And Tim Cook even mentioned, he said it'll be in your pocket or in your purse, and you'll get your notifications on the phone. And answering and taking calls work much just like how handoff works right now with the Mac, where you can take calls on your iPad, your iPhone, as well as your Macs and your MacBook. So it's all just a system all tethered to one central device, which is your iPhone.
Yeah. The Apple iWatch is going to be available for pre-order starting on April the 10th. So make sure those of you all line up to get it. For those of you all who plan to get the $10,000 gold watch,
Please loan me two
how
thousand dollars so I can
how
get a MacBook.
how about sponsoring a geek? How about feed a geek? Huh?
Yeah, well, if,
Feed a geek. Feed a geek. Can we do
like
feed a geek?
like take us out to dinner
Like
or
buy Darky Coney some rotisserie chicken. I'm just saying.
nah. If you got money for $10,000 Apple Watch, I mean, we ain't talking. We
You talking
talking
about
way.
Ruth Chris? You're thinking Ruth Chris.
Yeah, we talking about going to Roof Chris. We gotta do it big for real.
Yeah. So with the few minutes we have left, one of the last things that was stated on the Apple Live event today was this statement from Tim Cook. And that's what everyone at Apple is focused on, pushing forward and creating the future. It's really interesting when and I'm big on words. And I think that there's something very powerful about saying creating the future. It's one thing to walk into the future, to allow time just to come upon you, and you're now in the future. But when you actually have the mindset of creating the future, that the things that you do now are creating what is to become. That is a very powerful statement. And for him to say that, and I don't know if that's his personal mantra, I don't know if someone wrote that, but that's a very powerful statement to say that you're going to create the future. And what we saw today was definitely, future creating. It was really big. So thank you. We're about down to the last minute. Darky Conius, wrap up. Just final thoughts here. We need to get out of here, sir.
That's Apple's philosophy, creating the future. Everything they do at the company is set the standard. Before this, we weren't using this. You know, this is an evolution of something Apple did. You know, making laptops without CD drives and now making laptops with only one port. That's all an Apple thing. And now watches. So and now cars coming up in the future. So that's what Apple does as a company. They set the standard. Microsoft and Google, they innovate in their own way, but most of the time it starts with Apple.
Yeah, so true. So, first of all, to all of our viewers, to everyone who retweeted our link, thank you so very much. We really appreciate your support. For everybody who watched, thank you. I know this was long, but you got to admit that was 90 minutes of some really incredible, geeky, intellectual information. And I know that for those of you who sat through the whole 90, you're probably thankful that you did, because that was a lot of really good information. So please. Big time thanks to Darth Geconius. We know that he had some fuel rod troubles with the Death Star, but yet he still managed to make it on the show. Big time thanks to him for sharing his time, his knowledge, his energy to making this show happen. If you want to follow us, make sure that you go to Facebook. We are the Black Geeks. I'm not going to spell it again. You can just rewind it on YouTube. Cause I already spelled it at the beginning of the show. You can go to also on Twitter, the Black Geeks, Google Plus, also the Black Geeks. And guess what? There's also a website, www.theblackgeeks.com, where you can see our various podcasts, and also you can buy a shirt to support a geek. You
Yeah,
too.
support a
These
geek. Buy
shows,
some
these
shirts.
shows are actually, yeah, buy a shirt. And this is actually black and red. I just prefer to be broadcast in black and white because I think it's just classy. But ladies and gentlemen, I am Big Bob Rob. Thank you so very much for joining us. Please share this with a friend. Learn a little bit about Apple and some of the amazing work that they're doing over there. Thanks so much. Well, we will see you on the interweb. Thank you, Al Gore.